I'd like us to start with a paper authored by Shriya, Kuchibhotla, and Gideon Arulmani from the Promise Foundation.
In this presentation, I will describe a spoken language corpus of folklore and illustrate how this has been used alongside a child-directed print corpus to build a first iteration of an oral language intervention. The TalkTogether project in India focuses on providing quality stimulation in early childhood education. Striving to ensure strong foundations for literacy skills, the project celebrates oral language development, noting it to be a strong cascade towards holistic literacy. In order to do so, one strand in the project draws on indigenous oral traditions and cultures and co-develops interventions with local experts, teachers, and other cultural actors. The co-production process and the pre-pilot of a home-based program, which commemorates folklore to help stimulate a rich oral language development environment, will be reported. The broader aim of the TalkTogether project in India is to provide a proof of concept for an oral language program for the reception class years of 5 and 6-year-old children. We hope to further develop the oral language intervention to span approximately 27 weeks. Before I describe the structure of the home-based intervention and the pre-pilot, it is useful to think about the nature of the material we gathered. This material we claim is folklore. One definition of folklore is by Alan Dundes, who defines folklore as human autobiographical ethnography. Dundes encourages us to look through the marvel of community, culture, and material. These are materials that are said to aid in exploring cultural identities. Folklore is broad and encompassing. Holding its roots in oral traditions, folklore is composed of stories, songs, superstitions, all of which are passed on in communities through non-literated media. The word of mouth and spoken language are the two key factors in understanding community relationships and their unique folklore. To further support Dundes' embrace of folklore, we must include one of India's most prized folklorists, K. Narayan's advocacy for the recognition of folklore in the post-colonial context. K. Narayan, who champions India's ethnic diversity and its ever so diverse folklore, and pushes to break free of previous colonial constraints of human experiences of the world. He perceives folklore to be a crucial understanding of indigenous existences and their idea. Now that we have a working definition of what is folklore, let's move on to the structure of this presentation. This presentation is divided into 3 sections. The first section describes the material we worked with, the Promise Audio Library. The second section of the presentation focuses on the home program and the intervention structure, noting the processes involved in developing the intervention against a theoretical and pedagogical framework. The final section discusses one pre-pilot experience, touching upon the process documentation, the pre- and post-tests conducted, and the intervention's progress in the classroom. All 3 stages have a focus on Kannada, an Indo-Dravidian language dominant in the southern Indian state of Karnataka. The Promise Audio Library holds 167 audio material, all from folklore, all from the southern Indian state of Karnataka. Manually collected by members of the Promise team, the library comprises rhymes, lullabies, hymns, and nonsense poems, all narrated through songs with rhythms and tunes. Out of the 167 songs, the majority of the material, about 150 of the folk songs, are in Kannada, with 7 folk songs in Tulu and another 10 folk songs in Konkani, the 2 other languages of the region. We examined each folk material along multiple parameters. We looked at the community the folk song shared, who was the primary source of the folklore, the community activities and members associated with the folklore, the nostalgia attached to the folklore, and the varying forms in which the folklore was first consumed. The songs, along with their content, told us many things about themselves. A majority of the songs were drawn from a family of or close-knit community, while a sizable portion of the songs were also consumed by a wider audience. The content of the songs was also very diverse, with a few settings and characters occurring more frequently. The majority of the folk songs were set at home, with the setting of nature, such as forests and fields, coming in as a close second. The characters present in the folk songs were of family members, such as sisters, fathers, mothers, brothers, and grandparents, while many folk songs also possessed animal characters. There were also folk songs that spoke of games, household activity items, and even descriptions of the gods of the region. The majority of the audio corpus had potential for sound games that could be focused on alliteration and rhymes. A much lesser number of folk songs possessed rich material for exposure to figurative languages, less common words, and the more abstract emotion words and mental state words. This then led us to create a literary landscape of sorts, which allowed us to truly explore the audio corpus for its educational purposes. In order to better explain this, let me provide you with an example of the literary narratives found in the audio corpus. The corpus possessed conversations and monologues in song format, often sung to animals, birds, and even insects. The folk song, Neerali Ijua Meenu, translating to the fish that swims in the water, tells the monologue of a young girl towards a fish, where she begins to associate parts of her own body with that of the fish, while also noticing the differences that they both have. The folk songs are in day-to-day language. They possess easy rhyme and rhythm, making the material easy to memorize, while also aiding in the learning of new vocabulary. In the Neerali Ijua Meenu example, the material introduces words for parts of the fish and the work that they do. This example from the audio library demonstrates the potential of folklore to construct further material to help in language learning. Now that we have explored the audio corpus and its contents, we shall move on to the second part of this presentation, the intervention structure for a home program. We have planned our activities to span multiple domains based on Howard Gardner's The Theory of Multiple Intelligences. Within this framework, language learning, while firmly sitting within the linguistic domain, can be experienced through, for example, kinesthetic activities, spatial references, and through music. We also planned our activities to target a broad spectrum of skills as drawn up for the TalkTogether project by Sonali Nag. The first one, the must-have skills, focuses on new vocabulary learning, forms of narrative expression, and competent listening. The next step skill set focuses on word knowledge, inference making, and emergent akshara knowledge. And the third box, the second set of next step skills, focuses on visual literacy and book handling. We designed our interventions prioritizing the must-have skills, while the next step skill set ran in parallel when we introduced different lessons. Since our audio corpus boasts of varying animal narratives and their personifications, we chose the animal kingdom as the theme of the intervention. To provide a cohesive program, we sectioned out the lesson plans into 4 different sections: animals on land, as noted by the elephant; animals in water, as noted by the turtle; birds, as noted by the peacock; and insects, as noted by the butterfly. Each of these animals appeared in varying literary forms in the audio corpus, and we incorporated 1 folk song per lesson. Since the language in the audio corpus is familiar, we turn to the print corpus for rich vocabulary. Our roster of words included common animals such as ane, which is elephant, and rhinoceros, which is the compound word kadgha mruga, which means the animal with the sword-like headgear. Common words such as wings and forest sat alongside ambitious words like pause and swamp. Mental state words were also included. With our roster of words in hand, we incorporated different activities to ensure repetition, visualization, and the use of the roster of words. The folklore was materialized through a link person called Matu Matu. Matu Matu, which literally translates to talk talk, is the designated classroom friend. They are the non-gender conforming, culturally relevant classroom companion to create mediation between the students and the teacher, and is also introduced as the resident storyteller to the children. With this first iteration of the intervention mapped out, a first pre-pilot was conducted. Based on the learnings of the first pre-pilot, a second was started. This next section describes children's learning from the second iteration, executed within a virtual classroom beamed into children's homes. 12 students signed up for our program. This was an online class held during the pandemic. Our inclusion criteria required that there be a Kannada speaking guardian present with the child during the online class to help with translations and the craft and action activities we had planned for the child. Our process documentation focused on observing the teaching learning moments for one 5-year-old child with a low to medium comfort level for Kannada. We also collected pre and post test scores from all children. There were 7 5-year-old participants in the group, and it is their scores that we will present in order to understand the trends of learning from the 2-week intervention. Data from 2 must-have skills are presented. For vocabulary, our process documentation from the classes showed that the case study child was learning the target vocabulary through a number of associations, through action activities in the folklore presented, and by analyzing the words in riddles. The pre and post test data, consisting of 36 words from the roster of words, also showed that the participants expanded their learning of the introduced vocabulary. We saw this for common words, but more importantly, for the ambitious words. Children started with varying levels of Kannada knowledge, and some gained more from the program than the others, as seen in the difference in the light and dark bars. The quick learning of ambitious words taken from the print corpus signals the power of a structured oral language program that is informed by rich language found usually only in written works. Our process data focused on activities with little questions, wherein the teacher was to ask short, literal, and inferential questions to the students. We saw the case study child transition from using one word as answers to using small yet full sentences in class. A similar trend is seen with the pre and post test scores. The quick learning to express oneself in full sentences signals the power of a structured oral language program that asks teachers themselves to be mindful that they speak in full sentences in class. While we come to an end of this presentation, I think it's important to stress as to why the inclusion of folklore in oral language learning is important. Folklore is simply the celebration of oral traditions. Folklore includes all of language's nuances. The knowledge of folklore and oral traditions supports community belonging and the exploration of the balance between cultural awareness and appropriation. But most importantly, folklore empowers the spoken word and how it has been used to express the indigenous voice and perspective. A big thank you to all who have participated and contributed to this strand of the project. Thank you.
First of all, it's very interesting working on the folklores and the folkloric traditions in your area. May I know how long it took you to collect all of this material?
It took about 4 months of nearly one person leading a team of 8 others working directly in the community. So 4 months roughly.
And were you speaking with the elders of communities?
The sources were quite varied. One is the elders of the community and other corpuses that we have, other folklore databases that we have. We've actually gone into the very remote locations to collect information from a wide range. For TalkTogether, it was the elders in the community, teachers who use these stories in their classrooms, parents. These were the 3 main, I think, givers of the stories and the songs. Then, in addition to that, we also had other members of a community, like the head of the community, the head of the community would say, that old lady there, she knows a lot of songs. Why don't you go and speak to her? So that way we was kind of led, from one to another. Another interesting thing was, some of these stories came from very close to where I live. And we heard our gardener singing this song about the cock on the garbage pit and how the cock eats the things in the garbage pit and finally falls into the garbage pit, and this lovely song, in his own dialect. So although I know standard Kannada, all I could get were 1 or 2 words. So then when we spoke to him, he said, this is what we sing in our village. So then we traced it back to his grandmother, who then across the internet sang her songs to us on the phone. And so, also we had those kind of unexpected leads into collecting these songs.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions on the Q&A. One is from Jem Javier. How do you work on the authorship of the folklore that you collected? And how about stories of personal experiences or histories of the members of the community?
Yeah, Shriya, you have any comment on that?
So in terms of authorship, it has been
as Professor Gideon said, quite varied. So we do have a curation checklist in which we have listed out where the song comes from and who was the primary source of the song. As well as we also have a separate sort of document that we use to understand the different memories that come with the song, different activities that were performed while singing the songs, or different seasons or different festivals that occur while singing the song. So we have another document that collates all of these things, but all of this happens through word of mouth. So we actually have to ask the source as to what they remember or what they have done while learning or singing the song. And only then we collate that into a document for our purpose.